be posted all over Facebook or something. All right. We talked about slope, distance, midpoint yesterday, and graphing lines, right? We got through all that pretty much. We're going to do some more graphing today. But what is not in any of the notes is an example of solving these horrible equations that are all over 3A. Is it 3A, guys? Yes. If you look at 3A, it's just equation review. Just equation review with some really horrific looking equations, right? Okay. So the idea to get rid of fractions, not this hour. All right, guys, so when you get to worksheet 3, there's these horrendous equations with fractions. And I don't want you to change them to a decimal. And I don't want you to attempt to work with fractions and end up at the end with a big mess. What I want you to learn to do is to multiply through by the least common denominator to get rid of the fractions. That will be your first step, unless there's a problem like this, okay? When you get to one like this, your first step is going to need to be to distribute and then multiply through by the least common denominator. Now, as I tried to write at the top of this earlier today, these 3 examples that I have are not on your notes, okay? I don't know why I didn't give you any examples of this. I thought you could just do those problems, apparently. But I have 3 quick examples I'm going to fly through about getting rid of using the least common denominator. So if you want to write these down, you can somewhere. If you don't, just watch, okay? The common denominator here, any ideas? I kind of got excited about 40 because 8 and 5 went in there, right? But 7 doesn't. So I think the easiest thing to do, yes, because 8 and 5 already go into 40, let's just multiply that by 7. We'll get 280. And we're going to use that for a common denominator. Now, you could get a common denominator for every one of those fractions, but if you simply multiply through both sides by it, it will just get rid of fractions altogether, because it's legal to multiply both sides by something, right? Okay, so calculators, if you don't have one, grab one in the back. I'll pause the video. Need a calculator? So the idea here is we're going to multiply both sides by 280, which means we have to multiply everything. Now, if I just do 280 times 189, that's going to be a really big number. What do I also get to do? I get to divide by 40, right? So when I type that in, it's 280 times 189 divided by 40, because that fraction bar is just a division. And I get a lovely 1323. And there is no variable on that one. Moving on, over here, 280 times 2/7 is going to be 280 times 2, and then divided by 7, which I believe is 40. Is that right, guys? Anybody checking that? No? Let's see. That would go in. It'd be 80. Yes? Just kidding. All right. Then we have 280 times 17 divided by 8. $5.95, anybody? That one didn't have an N either. This first one did up here. Don't lose the N. And then 6 times 280 divided by 5, or 280 times 6 divided by 5. Doesn't matter. 280 times 6 divided by 5. I got 336, I think. What do I have to remember? That one had an N. Now you should be to equation that anybody could solve. It's gross numbers, but these are on the same side, so we just combine them, which would be 416n. Now, would everybody be okay if I just subtracted the 595 on both sides right up here? If I'm not showing enough steps, I kind of forget that some of you are coming from regular Algebra 2 where your teacher probably showed every step. So if I'm not showing enough steps and you're not getting it, please just let me know, either out loud or tell me after class. I'll work to show more steps. 1323 minus 595, 728, anybody? Divide both sides by 416. Now, I want an exact answer, so just do 728 divided by 416 with a lovely math enter, and see if it reduces. I got 7/4. Anybody get 7/4? I don't think that's what we got last hour, so it's a good thing I wasn't recording because I probably did something wrong. But I was at the board trying to do 3 things at once. But everyone got that? That actually has an exact decimal, right? I would prefer you leave it as a fraction. But if it's an exact decimal, I would take it. I don't want you to round or leave me an answer with a little bar, like 1.3 with a bar. Leave things as fractions, okay? All right. I don't know that we need to do this one together. I just wanted you to think for a minute. What would you do first here? Does 84 is divisible by 4 and 3? You could try on your calculator if you weren't sure. It is. So if I were to decide to use 84 as my common denominator, I would do 84n as the first one. You can't get away just because this was a quote-unquote whole number. It had a 1 out in front. You still have to multiply that by the 84. And then 84 times 5 divided by 4 is 105, maybe? Somebody check me. 84 times 1 divided by 3 would be 28, I'm thinking. I'm just making up stuff here, so tell me if I'm wrong. 84 times 199 divided by 84 would be 199. I'm going to stop because I think you could all solve that, yes? And you don't have this one anyways, so let's just... This is on the quiz, the section that's called equation solving or linear equation solving has one question like this on the quiz, okay? And you have to distribute first or you're very likely to make a mistake about how you multiply through by the common denominator. If you just distribute first, then you'll be fine. When you distribute first, remember you're multiplying 23 times what? The 9. What's 23 times 9, guys? You don't have this problem, so if you want to write it down to help you as an example, you can. Otherwise, just help me get through this real quick. 23 times 9 is 207. What is that over? Yes, the bottoms get multiplied together and you have a 10. Oh, then we'd have 23 times 17, which is a lovely 391, over 5 times 8 on the bottom, which would be 40. Then we're done distributing, so we still have a 29 over 8x minus 3707. Oh, there's an equal sign in there, Hofbauer. Okay. Now what's the common denominator? 40. So if I just multiply both sides through by a 40, I think I get 28x plus 391 minus 29 times 5, 5 times 3, 150, 140 something. 145. That one has an x. Equals negative 3707. Now, I think this one even comes out as a whole number. We're combining these because they're on the same side. So 828 minus 145 x's is 683 x's. This guy we need to subtract over here. Now they're both negative, so we're actually adding 8, 9, I think something like that. And if I take negative 4098 divided by positive 683, it just comes up negative 6. Questions? You think you can attempt those ones on 3A now tonight, if you didn't already? If you did them as decimals, please go back and do them as fractions, okay? All right, now we're going to move on and take the notes on worksheet 2. Did we pretty much get through the notes on 1? We might have skipped a couple graphing questions, but I think you got it because we're going to do more graphing today anyway. So this is at the top of worksheet 2. And what we're doing is talking about graphing and writing different forms of linear equations. And we're going to get to talking about parallels and perpendiculars today. First of all, it just starts out by reminding us that any equation that is linear can be written in one of these two forms. Y equals mx plus b, which is your very favorite form ever, right? Slope-intercept. Or this form, which is called standard form. Through the course of this year, I will occasionally refer to some mythical mathematician that I don't like, okay? This is one of the things that mythical mathematician did, was decided that we should have something called standard form. In standard form, there can be no fractions. The a value must be greater than 0 or equal to 0, okay? So standard form, in my opinion, is just a big pain in the neck. I'm like, why did someone come up with this? Well, the answer I can give you is that it's very pretty because there's never any fractions anywhere, okay? And it's useful for finding both the x and the y intercept, and we'll talk more about that. But standard form is when you can write it in this form where ax plus by equals c, and a has to be a positive number, b and c can be negative, and a, b, and c all have to be integers, no fractions or decimals. So, real quick, flying through this list, linear or not, the first one right here. Yes, we happy that would graph as a line? The second one, could we get the y by itself like we want to do? This is actually already in standard form. It is a line. X times y equals 6. No, it would graph like this. Okay, it's not a line. X equals 6. It is a line. It's a special case. We talked about it yesterday. It's a vertical line. It can be written in this standard form. It would be 1x plus 0y equals 6. So this is, yes, it's linear. It is vertical or straight. That's always my favorite answer. How do you graph this line? It's straight. They all are, right? Okay, y equals -5. That's another straight line. Happens to be horizontal. Okay. It is linear. What about y equals 2x squared minus 4? No, it's a parabola. Y equals square root of x plus 5. No, it's a half a sideways parabola. 4x minus y plus 6 equals 0. Some books actually call this general form, where they move the c over to the other side and say equals 0. Yes, it is a line. And absolute value of x plus 4 equals y. Well, it kind of started out as a line, but then the absolute value bent part of it back up over the x, so it's a v. So that's a no. All right. Slope. Tell me some things you know. Is this a definition of slope? Hey. Come on in. Yes. This is actually, part of that is the slope, right? But the whole equation is not an answer for slope. This is slope, m, or rise over run, or change in y over change in x, or y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. You don't have to write all those down. This is your notes, whatever you need to write down there. Questions? What does this symbol mean to do? Change in. It's called a delta. Anybody know what operation it is? Yeah, it is subtraction. Okay, it's like the change in the temperature. From this morning to tonight, what is the change in temperature? You just subtract. All right, common forms of lines, and you do have to know all three of these. On the next quiz, it actually lists the name and a blank, and you have to write down the form. I don't think anybody's going to get this one wrong, right? It's going to say, write down slope-intercept form. You're all going to plop down y equals mx plus b and go, yay! One right. Okay. Point-slope form. This is the one students struggle with because they don't remember using this much. You should have used this in geometry. How many of you feel like you're good with this one? A couple of you? Most of you are like, kind of remember that. Let me show you something. We just wrote this in our notes, yes? Okay. If I perform a little algebraic manipulation and I multiply both sides by this, these divide out, and I now have this equation. If I get rid of this little 2, because I'm really only going to replace one of the points, I now have y minus y1 equals mx minus x1. So it's really just a manipulation of the slope equation, okay? There are other ways that you can find the equation of a line given a point and the slope. I am going to use this way because I would encourage you to use this way because you have to use this way when you get to calculus. So when you're given a point and a slope, this is the form we're going to look for. Standard form is also called general form. Again, it's this nasty one where a has to be greater than or equal to 0 and a, b, and c must all be integers. All right, so we're going to practice manipulating these. How do you get this guy over to standard form? What's the first thing you have to do? Anybody? It's got to look like ax plus by equals c. So the x and y both have to be together, right? So if I add 4x over to this side, it would say 4x plus y equals 3.5. Is it okay now? Done? Is 3.5 an integer? No. We have a lot of options. We could multiply everything by 10. We could rewrite that as a fraction and then figure out what the common denominator is. Anybody, what do you want to do to get rid of the 3.5? Multiply by 10? Okay, so one form would be to move everything over one decimal place. So 4 would become 40, 1 would become 10, 3.5 would become 35. That's okay. It is standard form. What is true about all those numbers, though? We could divide them all by 5, which means we could have multiplied this original one. How many of you were thinking, let's just double it? Because the 3.5 could have become a 7. Okay. So the reduced form would be 8x plus 5y equals 7. Either one of these I would take. I'm not going to be super picky about that. They're both standard form. I'd rather have the reduced one, but what did I write? Yeah, multiplying by 2. Thank you. Clearly, that is a 2y when I divide all this by 5 or I multiply through by a 2. Thank you. I love when they don't stop me and then the video just has totally wrong information on it. So please don't be afraid to correct me. All right, the next question is this point slope guy, and they want us to solve for y and to get it in standard form. Can you solve for y on your own? Get the y by itself right here real quick. What'd you get? I need to look at learning names. And now I don't have my seating chart. Y equals anybody? 2x plus 12, yes, no. I distributed in, even if you added the 6 over to the end of this and then distributed, you should still get 12. Okay. To change that into standard form, which I have scribbled all over the top of, the first thing I'm going to do is move the 2x over to the other side. So subtract 2x to the other side, and I'd have a negative 2x plus a y equals 12. Is that standard form? Why? Some silly mythical mathematician made a rule that says a has to be greater than or equal to 0, so we need to change all the signs or multiply or divide by a negative 1. Okay? So it'll become a 2x, but it's changing the signs on everything, so it's minus y equals negative 12, and I can barely fit that in there. That's proper standard form. Question? Everybody good with that? All right. I want you to solve this last one for y equals. This you should have done a lot of in Algebra 1 and Algebra 2, isolating a variable. So I need to get the y by itself. Then I'm going to divide everything by negative 6. So I'll have y equals, what should I do with a negative 4 divided by a negative 6? Positive 2/3. And then back here I have a positive 7 divided by a negative 6, so a negative 7/6. How many of you had that? Is that going too fast? Were you getting there at least? Anybody lost? All right, we're going to go fast on a couple of these. First of all, tell me what it means when you see x-intercept down here. Okay, the point at which it crosses the x-axis. Everybody good with that definition? What can you tell me about the ordered pair for the x-intercept? Yes, the x-intercept has a y value of 0. So I'm going to write that here in my notes so I remember that. Y equals 0 for x-intercept. Y-intercept is when x equals 0. All right, this is our favorite kind of line, so I'm just going to slap it on here real fast. It crosses down somewhere at negative 5. It goes up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. I really don't know what that looks like, so I'm just going to fake it. What's the slope? Up 2 over 1, so if you wrote either one of those, I would be fine with that. Okay, which of those are we already good with? X-intercept or y-intercept? Yeah, we had negative 5 was where it crossed the y, but that ordered pair is actually across 0 and down 5, so 0, negative 5. Yeah, I don't know why that showed up a little higher than I wanted it to. If it's starting to creep so my little cursor isn't working, I'm going to cry. All right, x-intercept we said is when y equals 0. So what we need to do is go back to the equation and put in y equals 0. What's going to happen? If we solve that and add 5 over here and divide by 2, you could write 2.5 or 5 halves. Anybody making sense out of that? If you went to up 2 and over 1, up 2 and over 1, up 2 and over 1, it would cross somewhere between 2 and 3. Seems reasonable? Why are people sleeping? Just because you're got all this already? You're light years ahead? I know we're reviewing, guys, but it really helps to go through it. All right, quickly, what do you want to tell me here? Can you tell me the slope already? Yeah, this is the slope stuck right in here. How many of you, the first thing you want to do, though, is distribute and get the y by itself? I'm okay with that. I don't care. If we distribute here, we will have what? Half of an x is just half x. Half of a 2 is plus 1. To get rid of this guy, we're going to add another 1 over here. I got half x plus 2. So it would cross up here somewhere at 2, up 1 and over 2, so it's kind of flat, or more flat than the last one for sure. Which intercept are you good with already? Yeah, we solved and found this point was 2 up there, so that is across 0 and up 2, which is the y-intercept, because x equals 0. How are we going to find the other intercept, maybe? I'm going to go to this form. It doesn't really matter what form you use. And put in, if it's the x-intercept, y equals 0. So I would have 0 equals 1/2 x plus 2. If I subtract 2. Now, is it negative 1? If I divide by a half, I'm actually doing what? Yes, I'm going to multiply by 2 to get rid of that. So I get negative 4, 0. If you look back up at your picture, does it look like that could be negative 4? And it went up 2 over 1, up 2 over 1. Seems good. All right, one more, and then we're going to talk about parallel and perpendicular fun. All right. I really would like to encourage you to try something new on this problem and not solve for y. The whole point of this standard form, the only thing in life it's good for, in my opinion, Stegner form. Let me try that again. This is standard form. The only thing it's good for, in my opinion, is finding the x and y intercepts. Because if I want an x-intercept, I put in y equals 0. If I put a 0 in here, 3 times 0 is 0. So what does it say now? 2x equals 12, so I get x equals 6. If I go back and I want the y-intercept, I put in x equals 0. If I put a 0 in there, I'd have 2 times 0 is 0. All I have left is negative 3y equals 12. If I divide both sides by negative 3, I get what? So I have 0, negative 4. Now, if I plot those 2 points, over 6 and up 0, cross 0 and down 4, can you figure out the slope? You could solve the equation for y if it made you feel better. But what is the slope? How much did I go up and over? Up 4 and over 6, or that would reduce to 2/3. I don't care which way you do it. If you want to solve for the y, that's fine. But I'm just trying to show you that the one thing that standard form is good for is finding the slope and intercept. Okay, we're going to take a brief commercial break to review what we just did on that side. What are the kinds of equations? Y equals mx plus b, or what's standard form? Can anybody quote it? Ax plus by equals c. Point slope. Anybody quote that one? Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. Okay. The blank of the, what is this equation for right here? Slope. All right. Vertical lines, lines like this. What kind of slope do they have? They have rise, but no run. So we would get a number divided by 0. Can you do that? No, when the 0 is underneath, it's undefined. Does anybody know why that is? When I do this, 6 divided by 2 equals 3. What has to be true? 2 times 3 has to be 6? Is there any magical number that I can put in right there and multiply it by 0 and it'll become 2? Yeah, no. Okay. That was my fun for the day. So what is the slope? When we can't divide by 0, we say it is undefined. Back when I was in school, we were allowed to write no slope. But somebody decided no slope and 0 slope were just too close together and confusing, so it's now called undefined slope. Vertical lines will have an equation like, when it goes up and down, is it an x equals a number or y equals a number? Good call. X equals, and I'm just going to put it to the, I usually write this, because to me that's a number symbol, but you guys all read that as hashtag, right? And then, so anyway. Horizontal lines have 0 slope, and their equations are like y equals -4 or y equals some hashtag number or whatever. Yes? Okay, back to our regularly scheduled programming. We're going to quickly write an equation of this. If we had plotted a point over 2 and down 4, how would we write the horizontal equation that went through there? Horizontal line has 0 slope, so it's y equals 0x, and this particular one has a y value of -4. So what do you think the vertical line is that goes through that same point? X equals, and that point had an x value of 2. Don't you hate when it's way easier than you thought it was going to be? Then you feel silly. Okay, parallel and perpendicular. If I have a line, how do I figure out what its perpendicular is? What things have to happen? Okay, it has to be the opposite side. That's actually this blank down here. And you have to flip the slope over, which is called the reciprocal. And I can never spell that word right. How many of you learned it this way from a math teacher somewhere in your past? Refliprical, ha ha ha. Okay. What is it though if the slope doesn't change? So I have a line doing this and a line doing this. They are called parallel. Okay. So we are reviewing in the next 10 minutes everything you spent like 3 days on in algebra, probably a week on in algebra 1, and then 2 days in geometry. Hopefully only about a day on in algebra 2, but you've seen this stuff over and over, right? Okay. Given a line like this, y equals 1/4 x minus 6, what's that symbol mean? Perpendicular slope would become what? Yeah, flip it over, change the sign, you'd had -4/1 or just -4. This symbol, the little double L's, means parallel. And its slope, if it were parallel to that original line, would be 1/4 still. All right, put a big star by number 8, because this is on the quiz, a question just like this one, okay? Exactly in this kind of a format, I think. It says, which best describes the relationship between EF and GH? So there is some line that connects E and F and some line that connects G and H. And they want us to decide, are they parallel, perpendicular, neither, or the same line? Hint, it's not going to be the same line. All right. What do we need to be able to determine that? The slopes. How do we find the slope from E to F? My little geniuses, tell me you do what? Okay, so you want to do it in that order. So this would be an X and a Y and an X and a Y. So if we start with the second X minus the first X, nope. Don't listen to me. I did the right thing, but I said the wrong words, as happens sometimes. My mouth doesn't work with my brain and my hand. The definition of slope is change in Y over change in X. So I was using Y's, but I said X. 6 minus 3, it's Y minus Y over X minus X. And that is actually the most common mistake people do, is they do the slope is change in X over change in Y. All right, this becomes, what do I get? 3 over 5, anybody? Positive 3/5. Okay, real quick, let's do GH. Okay, the Y values are -1, and then I'm supposed to subtract the other Y, which is -6. And then I have 11 minus 8. This gives me +5 and +3 or 5/3. Parallel, perpendicular, or neither? Well, if I were to go up 3 and over 5, oh my goodness, that was the worst line ever. Or up 5 and over 3. Now I know I drew them badly, but are these two lines here and here parallel, perpendicular? Neither. What's wrong? Why aren't they parallel? Why aren't they parallel? Listen to my question. They're not exactly the same. Why aren't they perpendicular? Because while it flipped over, they are still both increasing in positive slopes. We good? All right. If you can't do 9A, I think you should go home now. What do you think? Can you just graph this line? I probably can't on this tiny little graph paper, so I get to go home. Start at 4, up 1 over 2, up 1 over 2. Now I think my best bet is to cheat and use the line tool, because otherwise it's going to be really crooked. Yeah, and I cheated and used the line tool ineffectively. It doesn't hit any of the dots. All right, I'm going with there. All right, should have arrows on it. Miss Heimer will fail me. Okay, find the equation of the line. What's this symbol mean? Perpendicular to that. Okay. So the slope was 1/2. The new perpendicular slope is now, flip it over, change the sign, and I just have -2. I hate this example. And every year I'm going to fix this, because there's also a -2 down here. It's an X value, right? So now when you go back and look at your notes, you're going to say, where did that -2 come from? Well, there's 2 different -2s. I hope you don't have to do that. But I am going to use, okay, I have a point and a slope. Ooh, what should I try? A point and a slope. Let's try point slope form. Point slope form looks like this. So what am I going to plug in? I'll leave the Y all by itself. What am I going to plug in for the Y value from the points? We're using this point here. So this is going to be X1 and Y1. So I have a 3. The slope is -2, and unfortunately X1 is also -2. So now I hope nobody's confused. This was the slope. This was from the ordered pair, and yes, they're the same number. Y minus 3 equals -2 times X would be -2X. -2 times, this became a +2, right? So I have a -4. Or if I add 3 over there, I have -2X minus 1. Did someone get that? Let's see if it works. Go down to -1, up 2, and back 1. or down 2 into the right one. All right, I'm freehanding it. It's crooked, but does it appear to be making a right angle? Does it appear to be going through -2, 3? If I use the world famous Hofbauer big dot theorem, they are clearly intersecting at -2, 3. Okay. Anybody ever have Miss Lenz last year before she moved to Alaska? She's a fantastic science teacher. She said, I even used that in class. I call it the Hofbauer big dot theorem. When she would draw something it wasn't quite right, she'd just make it bigger. Okay. Any questions? I got a question for you. If it just said write the equation, was this an equation? That's an equation of a line, yes? I could have stopped there. Or I could have gone on and solved for y. Or I suppose if Miss Hofbauer was really mean, I could say you had to get the y in standard form. All right, so we will finish up a couple of these tomorrow. But you should be able to get through side 4B. There might be a couple. The ones that perpendicular bisector at the end, feel free to skip those, okay? The last 2 questions, we'll go over those tomorrow. Have a great day. Don't forget to put calculators back. Put your chair in. Is it 5th hour now? Okay, I have to do this all over again. Oh, I forgot to turn this off, the recording.